My mom spent my entire childhood giving everything to my golden child sister: a new Tesla, luxury vacations, even a condo at 18. Meanwhile, I learned how to smile on command while my name got skipped over like it never mattered. My name is Emma Carter, and I am 28. The night my mother finally found out I had been quietly running a $15 million tech company, she did not clap. She lost it. It happened at Christmas dinner, right after she raised her glass to my sister. I waited until my mother finished praising her. Then I set my fork down, looked straight at my mom, and said the truth I had swallowed for years. I told her I owned the company. I built it from nothing, and the valuation was $15 million. For a heartbeat, nobody breathed. Then my mother laughed like I had just made it up for attention. She called me a liar, right there in front of everyone, and my sister leaned in with that familiar look that said, "Sit down, stay small, let me have this too." That is when my aunt reached into her bag and pulled out a folded newspaper clipping, the kind of proof you cannot argue with. My mother snatched it with shaking fingers. My sister went pale. Voices rose, chairs scraped, the room erupted, and the family mask cracked. If you have ever been the invisible one in your own family, stay with me, because what happened next was not just a reveal. It was the moment they had to face what they did, and the moment I decided what it would cost them. I need you to understand what that dinner felt like, so you have to see the years that led up to it. My sister is Kara, 3 years younger than me, and my mother, Susan, has called her my miracle since the day she was born. Kara was premature. My mom lived in a hospital chair for months, terrified she would lose her. When Kara finally came home, my mom did not just love her, she guarded her, like the rest of us were background extras in Kara's survival story. I was 5, old enough to notice the shift, old enough to learn a dangerous lesson early. If Kara cried, the whole house moved. If I cried, my mom told me to be strong because Kara had it harder. My dad, Mark, did not fight her on it. He used the word mature like it was a medal. Mature meant convenient. When I was 11, I asked for a science kit. I was obsessed with how things worked, the way tiny parts could turn into something useful. Christmas morning, Kara opened an extravagant dollhouse with tiny furniture and a little chandelier. My mom squealed and took photos from every angle. When it was my turn, I unwrapped a book about science. Not the kit, just a book. I told myself it was fine. Then Kara got bored and asked to flip through my book, and my mom told me to let her because sharing was important. I sat on the floor with my hands clenched and watched sticky fingers bend pages while my mom smiled like this was sweet. That was the first time I felt something sharper than sadness. It was the first time I understood the rules were not equal and never would be. By 15, I stopped asking for anything big because the answer was always the same. Kara needed it more. Kara had been stressed. Kara had a hard week. That year, my mom threw Kara a birthday party that looked like a magazine spread, balloons, catered food, a photographer. I remember standing near the kitchen doorway while strangers praised my mom for how devoted she was. When I tried to help, my mom snapped that I was in the way. When my birthday came, it was a quick dinner and a gift card, and my mom forgot to invite my best friend because she said she assumed I would not care. I did care. I just learned not to show it. The hardest part is this: my mom was not a cartoon villain. She could be warm. She could laugh with me in the car. She could hug me before school. Then Kara would text, and my mom's entire face would change like someone flipped a switch. In her mind, she had a story that made sense. Kara was fragile. Kara was sensitive. Kara needed constant reinforcement or she would break. I was the sturdy one, the one who could take a hit. My mom did not see that being sturdy at 13 just meant I had gotten good at swallowing feelings without choking. At 18, graduation should have been my turning point. I earned scholarships. I won a statewide coding competition. Strangers clapped for me louder than anyone in my family ever had. I thought my parents might finally look at me differently. Instead, in the parking lot after the ceremony, my mom pulled me aside and asked if I could postpone college for a semester. Kara had decided she wanted a gap year and she needed help moving into the condo my parents were buying her. My mom said it like it was practical, like my future was a flexible object she could fold and store when it was inconvenient. I told her no. It was the first full no I had ever given her. My mom stared like she did not recognize me, then sighed and said, "Do not be selfish, Emma." That word burned, as if my life was a resource the family could allocate. That night, I opened a notebook and wrote down every time I could remember being asked to shrink for Kara. Not because I wanted to wallow, because I could feel the family rewriting history in real time, and I refused to let my own memory be edited. It started as a list. It turned into a ledger. Dates, events, what was promised, what was taken back, what I was told to understand. My dad once saw it on my desk and asked what it was. I said homework, and he believed me, because nobody in my family ever looked closely at me unless Kara needed something. Jessica came into my life around then. We met in an after-school coding club and stayed close through graduation. She listened, believed me, and said I was allowed to be angry. She never told me to forgive fast or to keep the peace. She told me peace that only exists because one person stays quiet is not peace. And Aunt Linda, she was my dad's older sister, living 2 states away, only showing up on holidays. She was sharp, observant, and not easily fooled. When I was 16, she caught me in the hallway after a family party and asked, quietly, if I was okay. I almost lied out of habit, but she looked at me like she could see straight through my smile. She did not lecture me. She only said, "If you ever need someone, call me." I saved her number and never forgot it. By the time I was 20, the pattern was carved into me. Kara could do no wrong. I could do no right unless it served the family image. But the notebook in my drawer and the code on my laptop gave me a second life, one where I did not have to compete for scraps. I told myself I would build something so undeniable that even my mother could not dismiss it. Not to win love, to force them to live inside the truth for once. College was where I finally breathed. In classrooms and labs, nobody cared that Kara was charming or that my mom thought I should be grateful. They cared whether I could solve a problem. I studied computer science and product design, and I built small tools between classes, budgeting apps, scheduling bots, anything that made life smoother. I slept 4 hours a night, not because I was chasing a fantasy, but because building things was the only place my mind felt quiet. After graduation, I took a safe job for exactly 9 months. The paycheck was steady, the work was boring, and my manager treated me like a replaceable cog. I quit with $2,000 in savings and a laptop that sounded like it would die if I opened one more browser tab. Jessica called me reckless. Then she asked how she could help. The company started as a single idea that came directly from my life. A privacy-first finance platform that tracked who paid for what, logged agreements, and made it harder for money to be used as a weapon. I called it Ledger Lane. That name came from my notebook, from the need to keep a record when people rewrite history and then call you dramatic for remembering. I built the first prototype in a cramped shared office and pitched it to anyone who would listen. Investors smiled politely, then asked who was backing me. When I said no one, their smiles turned into soft disappointment. They suggested I get a co-founder with a bigger network. They suggested I do a safer idea, something more fun. I heard the same message I had heard my whole childhood, just dressed up in business language. Not you. Not like this. Not without permission. The first year was brutal. My bank account dipped into double digits. I sold my car and lived on the subway. I signed a contract with a small clinic group to pilot the software. Then their CFO backed out at the last minute, and I spent a weekend staring at my ceiling, doing the math of failure. I thought about calling my parents. I pictured my mom's voice, sweet with concern that would really be triumph, and I shut my phone off. Pride is not always pretty, but it kept me alive. I landed my first break by accident. A local reporter wrote about a hack at a nonprofit, and I emailed her a blunt explanation of why most finance tools ignore families and small teams. She called me back. 2 weeks later, she quoted me in an article about digital trust and hidden financial abuse. That article did not make me famous, but it made the right person curious. A seed investor named Ravi reached out, asked hard questions, and offered enough money to hire one engineer and keep the lights on for a year. I signed the paperwork with shaking hands and cried in the bathroom afterward, because for the first time in my life someone had looked at my work and said yes, without asking what my family thought. I built slowly and carefully. Every feature had a reason. Every dollar had a plan. Once revenue arrived, I hired a real CFO, a woman named Dana who could read a balance sheet like a detective reads a crime scene. We went from one pilot client to 10, from 10 to 100. Businesses used Ledger Lane to manage reimbursements and shared budgets. Couples used it to split expenses without fighting. Adult siblings used it to track care costs for aging parents. It was not glamorous tech. It was practical tech. The kind that quietly saves people from quietly being controlled. I love that. While my business grew, my family stayed the same. Kara bounced between shiny dreams. 1 month she was going to be a fashion editor. The next she was launching a lifestyle brand. My parents funded every pivot like it was destiny. I kept my mouth shut because I had learned that silence was safer. When I visited, my mom asked if I was still doing that computer thing. My dad asked if I had met anyone nice. Nobody asked what I was building. Then Kara did something that nearly crushed me, and I still do not know if she meant to. A friend of hers worked at a small venture fund. Kara mentioned at brunch that I had been obsessed with a finance tracking idea forever, like it was a cute childhood hobby. 2 weeks later, I saw a startup with a nearly identical pitch deck get fast-tracked into that fund's program. Their screenshots were painfully familiar, down to the same feature names I had used in internal mock-ups. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. I confronted Kara privately. She shrugged and said she was just talking. Then she smiled and said, "You should be flattered. I could not afford a lawsuit. I could barely afford rent." Instead, I outbuilt them. Dana negotiated a partnership with the clinic group that had backed out on me, and we packaged Ledger Lane for healthcare payroll reimbursements. It was a niche, but it was defensible. We doubled revenue in 6 months. The copycat startup burned through cash-chasing hype, then quietly folded. I did not celebrate out loud. I just wrote down Kara's smile in my notebook and underlined it. Not because I wanted to punish her, because I wanted to remember the exact moment I realized she did not just benefit from the favoritism. She enjoyed it. By the time I was 27, Ledgerlane had traction, clients, and leverage. An acquisition offer came in, then another, then a term sheet that put our valuation at $15 million. When Dana slid the document across my desk, my hands trembled. Not from greed, from recognition. I had built something undeniable with nobody cheering for me. I could have kept it private forever. And honestly, part of me wanted to. But another part of me wanted one single moment where my mother could not pretend I was nothing. So when Susan texted the annual Christmas dinner invitation, the one with too many exclamation points, I stared at it for a long time. I pictured Kara arriving in a new outfit, my mom beaming, my dad making small talk. I pictured myself nodding politely while my life got ignored again. Then I pictured my notebook, the ledger of every time they chose her over me. I did not want revenge in the sense of violence. I wanted the kind of revenge that forces people to live inside the truth with no way to wiggle out. I texted back, "I will be there." And I promised myself this: I would not beg to be seen. I would simply show them who I was and let them deal with the consequences. The thing about walking into my parents' house is that my body still remembers the rules, even when my mind is done obeying them. Smile first. Speak softly. Do not take up too much space. Kara was already there when I arrived, laughing in the living room like she owned the air. She had a new designer bag resting casually by her chair, the kind of detail my mom treated like a trophy. Susan spotted me and did the quick version of a hug, the one that checks the box without lingering. Mark nodded from the corner, phone in hand, half present. Kara looked me up and down and said, "Oh my God, Emma, you actually came?" Like it was shocking I still existed. Dinner started the way it always did. Kara talked. Susan reacted. Mark tried to keep things light. Every story Kara told had a price tag attached, and my mother said it all with pride. The Tesla, the Paris trip, the condo paperwork that had been finalized right after Kara turned 18. Susan described it like generosity, like destiny, like Kara had earned it just by being Kara. I listened without interrupting. Not because I was small, because I was steady. I had come with a plan, and I refused to waste it on side fights. My notebook stayed in my bag, but I could feel it like a weight against my hip. Dana had asked me earlier that day if I was sure I wanted to do this. I told her yes. I told her I was done letting my family pretend I was a footnote. When dessert was served, Susan lifted her glass and smiled at Kara the way she always did, like Kara was the best thing Susan ever made. Susan said a toast about family, about blessings, about how proud she was of her youngest daughter and her bright future. Mark added a few words that sounded practiced. Kara pretended to be humble and soaked it up anyway. That was the moment I set my fork down. I did it calmly. Not dramatic, not shaky, just final. I said, "I have an update too." Susan blinked like the script had changed without her permission. Kara tilted her head, already annoyed. Mark looked up for real, which almost never happened. I said, "For the past few years, I have been building a company. It is called Ledger Lane. This year, we reached a $15 million valuation." The silence that followed was not respectful. It was stunned, confused, and slightly offended, like I had spoken in the wrong language at the wrong table. Susan let out a short laugh, not warm, not proud. A laugh that meant no. She said, "Emma, stop. Do not do this right now." I said, "I am not joking." Kara's smile twitched. She said, "That is hilarious." Susan's face tightened. She said, "You cannot possibly expect us to believe that. You never even talk about work." I almost smiled at that, because it was the point. They never asked. They never cared enough to notice. Kara leaned forward, voice low and sharp. She said, "So what is this, Emma?" A cry for attention. Mark finally spoke. He said, "Let us keep the peace." Susan turned on him, then turned back to me. Her eyes were bright with something that looked like fear but felt like anger. She said, "You are lying. You are trying to embarrass us." And that is when Aunt Linda, who had been quiet the whole dinner, set her napkin down like she had been waiting for this exact moment. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded newspaper clipping. She slid it across the table toward Susan. Linda said, "It is not a lie. I read this last month. I kept it because I had a feeling you would need proof to believe your own daughter." Susan grabbed it. Her hands shook. Her eyes scanned the page. The color drained from her face as she hit the headline, the photo, and the number printed in black and white. Kara went pale and whispered, "What is that?" And then the room exploded. Not with applause, with denial, accusation, panic, and the sound of a family realizing the story they built was about to collapse. Tell me this. If your own mother looked at proof of your success and still chose to call you a liar, what would you do next? Kara was the first one to recover, because Kara always recovered. She snapped into defense like it was muscle memory. She pushed her chair back just enough to look powerful and said, "This is bullshit, Emma. Anybody can print a fake article." Susan latched onto that immediately because it was easier than accepting the truth. She said, "Yes, that is exactly what this is." "Linda, why would you bring this?" "Emma, why would you do this to your sister?" There it was. Even now, it was about Kara. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I reached into my bag, pulled out my laptop, and opened it on the table. Dana had taught me something important in business. When someone wants to drag you into emotions, you stay in facts. Facts do not beg. I turned the screen toward them and said, "These are our audited financials. These are our contracts. These are the names of our clients." Kara scoffed. She said, "You could have photoshopped that." I nodded like she had just confirmed what I already knew about her. Then I tapped a contact on my phone and hit speaker. Dana answered on the second ring. I said, "Dana, quick question. What is Ledger Lane's current valuation on the term sheet?" Dana said, 15 million. "And Emma, are you at the dinner?" I said, "Yes." They need to hear it from someone they cannot dismiss. Dana did not hesitate. She said, "Congratulations again, by the way. And please remind them your equity percentage is controlling. You built this? You own this." Susan stared at my phone like it had insulted her personally. Mark's mouth opened and closed. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger and realizing he should have known her the whole time. Kara's voice cracked just slightly. She said, "Why are you doing this?" I finally let myself look at her fully. I said, "Because I am tired." Susan snapped. "Tired of what?" I said, "Tired of being your convenient daughter. Tired of being the one you only praised when it made you look good. Tired of watching you hand Kara everything and then calling me selfish for wanting basic respect." Susan's eyes flashed. She said, "We gave you what you needed." I almost laughed, but it came out cold. I said, "You gave me silence and called it peace." Kara leaned forward, angry again. She said, "You are acting like I stole something from you." I looked at her and said, "You did. Not the money. The space. The assumption that I mattered. And you liked it." Kara stood up. She said, "You are jealous." I said, "No. Jealousy is wanting what someone has. I do not want to be you. I want you to stop pretending you did nothing while I disappeared." Susan cut in, voice shaking. She said, "Emma, please do not make this ugly." That word. Ugly. The same family instinct to cover the truth with a tablecloth. I reached into my bag and pulled out my notebook. I placed it on the table and opened it to a page I had marked. I said, "This is not emotions. This is a record." I read one line, the condo at 18, the date, the amount, the comment Susan made about Kara needing stability. I read another, the Tesla, the date, the way Susan told me not to be bitter. I read another, graduation, the way Susan asked me to postpone my future for Kara's comfort. Mark flinched as if each line hit him in the chest. Kara's face twisted, not with guilt, but with panic, because for the first time the spotlight was not worship, it was exposure. Linda spoke softly. She said, "Susan, stop. Listen." Susan's voice rose. She said, "I did what any mother would do. Kara needed me." I said, "And I did not." "That is what you told yourself." Kara's hands balled into fists. She said, "So what now, Emma? You want a trophy. You want us to bow." I shut the notebook and slid it back into my bag. Then I said the line I had promised myself I would not soften. I said, "No, I want accountability. And since you are all so interested in money when it is Kara's money, here is the part you will understand. None of you gets access to mine. Susan's breath caught. Mark whispered, Emma? Kara laughed, sharp and desperate. She said, like we would ask you. I looked at her and said, you already have. You just call it family. Kara's face hardened. She said, you think you are better than me because you got lucky with some app. I said, it was not luck. It was work. The work you never had to do because Mom did it for you. Kara snapped. So what? You are my boss now. I held her gaze. I said, if you want to experience the real world, Ledger Lane is hiring. You can apply, but you will not be handed anything. And if you are not qualified, you will hear the word no, just like I did. The silence after that was different. It was wounded. It was real. Susan's eyes filled, but even then she tried to control the narrative. She said, you are tearing this family apart. I stood up, slow and steady, and pushed my chair in. I said, no, I am just refusing to hold it together by myself anymore. Mark finally found his voice. He said, Emma, wait. I picked up my coat. I looked at Kara, then at Susan, and I said, this is the last Christmas where I sit at this table and pretend I am less so. You can feel like more. As I turned toward the hallway, I heard Susan's chair scrape back hard. I heard Kara say my name like a warning. I heard Mark say it like a plea. And right before I reached the door, I heard footsteps behind me. Fast. Heavy. What would you do if the person running after you was not the one you expected? Cold air hit my face the second I stepped onto the porch. Behind me, the house was still roaring, voices piling on top of each other, but outside, it was just my boots on the steps and my breath turning white. I told myself not to look back. I had shown them the facts. I had stopped begging to be seen. The door flew open. Emma, wait. It was my dad. He jogged down the steps, coat half on, one hand out like he could pull me back into the old script. I kept walking to my car. My fingers shook as I dug for my keys. Leaving a family is not one clean emotion. It is relief and grief at the same time. Dad, stop. I turned just enough to see him. His eyes were red. He looked older than he did an hour ago. I am not here to argue, I said. I am done. He swallowed and held up a thick envelope. Not a check. Not a lecture. An envelope that looked worn, like it had been opened and closed in his head 1,000 times. I should have given you this years ago, he said. I did not take it at first. I just stared, suspicious of anything that could still hurt. He stepped closer, careful. I wrote those when you were little, when you started pulling away, when I saw your mother focus on Kara and I told myself it would balance out. My stomach dropped. Inside are letters, he said. I never sent them because I thought keeping the peace mattered more than saying the truth. The door opened again and Kara appeared, face tight with panic. She started down the steps, then froze when she saw the envelope in my dad's hand. For once, she did not know what to do. My mom stood in the doorway with one hand over her mouth. She did not come after me. She just watched. I took the envelope. It was heavier than paper should be. This does not fix it, I said. I know, my dad said, but it is the truth, and you deserved it. I got into my car and drove away with my phone lighting up again and again. Mom calling, Kara texting, Dad calling. I did not answer. At the first red light, my hands shook so hard I had to grip the wheel with both fists. I had wanted them to finally see me. I had gotten my wish. And it hurt. I did not open the envelope that night. I set it on my counter and stared at it like it might bite. In the weeks that followed, my mother sent message after message, apologies tangled with excuses, asking me to come home, asking me not to punish Kara. I left every thread on scene. My dad tried to show up at my office once. Security stopped him at the lobby doors and called me. I told them to let him leave in peace, but I did not go down. I could not carry him too. 3 months after Christmas, an email hit our careers inbox with Kara's name on it. She applied to Ledgerlane. No referral, no special treatment, just a resume that was mostly shine. Dana forwarded it to me. Your call. I stared at it, remembering the condo, the Tesla, the way Kara smiled when my work was treated like a joke. Then I replied with the same cold sentence I had heard my whole life. Thank you for your interest. We are moving forward with other candidates. A month later, an invitation arrived. Kara's engagement party. Her handwriting inside. I am sorry. I do not expect you to come. I just needed you to know I was wrong. I tore the card in half. Then I stopped. I collected the pieces and put them in a drawer beside my dad's envelope. Ledger Lane kept growing. People called me self-made. On paper, I won. But on Christmas Eve, my phone buzzed at midnight. Mom calling. I watched it ring until it stopped. I sat alone at my table, surrounded by everything I built, and finally admitted the truth. I proved them wrong. I did not get them back.